Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar on building a skilled workforce for the future. A webinar that explores the benefits of hosting a student placement for non-government alcohol and other drug services. I'm Chris Keys, the Deputy CEO at NADA. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands that we're all coming in from today. For us at NADA, this is the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I invite you to use the chat function if you'd like to let us know what lands you're dialing in from. I want to recognise the living culture of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and the importance they place on connection to the land and to each other, to family and community, which is so central to well-being. I pay respect to elders past and present and young people who will go on to be the elders of the future. I also pay respect to Aboriginal people online today. With many competing demands on service providers, the thought of supervising a student might not be front of mind. You might have hosted a student perhaps in the past, or you're yet to be involved and curious about what could be involved. So today we've arranged a brief panel discussion to find out about how student placements currently work, what to expect as a host organisation and supervisor, and the flexible approaches that can be available to enable placements to occur. We will also hear what some of the benefits of a placement can be for both organisations and the student themselves, remembering that students are the future workforce of the AOD sector. It is my pleasure to be joined today by a fantastic panel of speakers. I will invite each of them now to introduce themselves. Curtis, we'll start with you.
Hello everyone, my name is Curtis. I work at Odyssey House, New South Wales in the residential team. I'm currently an AOD treatment worker and I've been doing this for about 2.5 years now. I came directly from Campbelltown TAFE and jumped straight into the workforce. So yeah, that's me. Hope you enjoyed today. Thank you.
Thank you, Curtis. I'll now invite Heather.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Heather McCarran. I work for TAFE New South Wales in the delivery of our community services courses across predominantly our region south, which is Wollongong down almost down to the, well, basically down to the Victorian border and then off into the Riverina area. But a lot of our courses now we do deliver across the state. So the courses that I look after are the Diploma of Community Services, Certificate 3 in Community Services, Certificate 4 in Alcohol and Other Drugs, and the Diploma of Youth Work.
Thank you, Heather. I'll invite Nathan.
Hi guys, my name's Nathan Hind. I am currently a facilitator / teacher at TAFE New South Wales. I actually work under Heather McCarran, who Heather actually taught me when I was a student. I currently teach the community services, AOD, and also youth work. So yeah, nice to meet you.
Great. And Heidi.
Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Heidi Becker. I'm the manager of the Street University in Liverpool. We're a drug and alcohol youth service. I've also managed many services, residential and non-residential, for quite a few years and been in the industry for a long time. Also supervised many placements.
Thank you so much to all of our fantastic panelists. Okay, so just a little bit about how this afternoon's session is going to work. I've got a few questions for each of our panel members to draw on each of their perspectives and their experience in relation to student placements. So I will ask these of each panel member one by one, and there'll be time at the end to take questions from participants online. So I'm going to start by having a chat with Heather.
Perfect.
Okay, so Heather, can you tell us what the training, tell us about the training that you provide across community services and the way that placements fit into that?
Sure. Okay. So I mentioned previously the courses that we do run. The courses that have a work placement component attached to them are the Certificate for in Alcohol and Other Drugs, the 2 diploma courses, so the Diploma of Youth Work and the Diploma of Community Services courses. So generally those 3 courses run across a calendar year, so they take about 12 months to complete. They're full-time courses. They all have a placement component to it, to the course, which the students start that placement generally halfway through the course. So the idea of the placement is that it is, I guess, the conduit between what a student is learning in the classroom and the industry that they'll end up working in. So it's a really essential part of the course. So the reliance on our industry partners is fairly important to the delivery of those courses. And sometimes that placement component can involve project work as well. So I guess there's lots of flexibility around how those placements look.
Fantastic. Thank you. And could you tell us what sorts of things you need or expect from an organisation when they take on a student?
I guess a willingness to take on the student, which I guess if you're agreeing in the first place, that is because you are motivated to have a student on placement. And we do recognise that having a placement student can sometimes entail extra work for services. So what we do encourage is for services to have more than one student. We find that that's a better outcome for the student and the service, because the student can kind of debrief with each other, toss around ideas, and I guess get creative together around what they could be doing whilst they're on placement. So we do expect that a student is motivated, that they have initiative, and that they are creative. So if a student can come up with ideas on what they think they can do when they're on their placement, that's really fabulous. In terms of the organisational responsibilities, providing some appropriate learning activities for the student, supervising what they're doing, and providing feedback and support and debriefing to the student. And that's where sometimes if a student has a buddy with them, it can make that a little bit easier for the student and the supervisor. We try to keep the paperwork quite minimal. Now I'm talking from Region South. So within TAFE New South Wales, we are working towards a one delivery model where every bit of paperwork is going to be aligned, but we're not quite at that point yet. In our region, we keep our paperwork to a minimum. So there's a signing off of the completion of placement hours. There's a third-party report sort of checklist that is attached to the subjects that a student will do on their placement. So, for example, in the excuse me, in the Cert 4 AOD course, there's 3 what we call units of competence, which is training package lingo, otherwise known as subjects. So those 3 subjects have some tasks that are linked to placement. The student is responsible for documenting examples of how they have actioned some of those tasks. So a supervisor would then, I suppose, make comment on, yes, I observed the student doing this. The student did do this whilst they were at the placement. This is not fabricated, and just sign off on a report. So it is quite minimal within our courses because we've all worked in the sector and we know how inundated people already are with lots and lots of paperwork. So we try to keep that to a minimum for our agency supervisors.
Fantastic. Thank you, Heather, for stepping us through those requirements and expectations.
Pleasure.
Okay, so next I'm going to have a little chat with Curtis.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you? Good afternoon, everyone.
Okay, so Curtis, what I'd love to know, as someone who completed your training as a student and is now working in the AOD sector, how important was that student placement experience for you?
It was very important to me, as it kind of opened my eyes to the sector itself, and it humbled me in a way. As you know, I found myself being like really like go get a student and wanting to like show what I can do, and like look at me, I can do this. I'm ready to go out there. But it really humbled me to like stop and take a look back and like be a student. Don't be trying to pass the get the tick on the subject. Learn, be there and learn. So it opened my eyes to be like you're a small fish in a big sea, and be able to learn. Like it was very good to be a part of the sector, which made me want to become an AOD therapist myself. So when I was in placement, it was good because it allowed me to put my skills to the test while also asking a lot of questions, and also being able to like fall like that safety net of falling without doing too much damage to myself or anybody else. It was a safe place to be, because when you get straight into the sector, you got to be very careful, because you're working with vulnerable people. You're still fresh, so work experience is a very crucial part of any sort of TAFE course, or even anything really. So that was my experience with it.
Thank you, Curtis, and I hope that you didn't literally fall.
No, definitely not.
How would you say, so you talked about how it sort of gave you an idea about what the work was really like and sort of motivated you to want to work in the sector. Was there anything else that you would say about how that experience led you to where you are now working with Odyssey?
It led me to work in this individual sector, as I just I could see where like that's the path I wanted to go, and the experience I had while I was on placement, working with vulnerable people and working with like people within the AOD sector, it allowed me to kind of, no, I'm not going to say sympathize, but empathize and relate to like own personal struggles and all that kind of stuff, but as well as be able to be a proper support and help where help is needed. Like you see people wanting to be firemen and all that kind of stuff. Like at the same time, like it's great to be able to be the person on the ground behind the scenes as well. Like it's awesome to be a part of this whole sector and be able to. You're not gonna be able to help everybody. That's our goal. But as long as you help like at least one person, you're doing the right job. And the experience when I was on workplace, when I actually got to help a few people, while I was learning. When I first started in placement, I was very nervous. I was very like, oh, can I do this? Like I'm going to show them everything I've got. I can, I was very nervous, but at the same time, I had a conversation with my organizer, like the person that was taking me around, showing me the ropes of the organization. And that's kind of what I was saying before, like it really humbled me, because like I don't know everything. I didn't know everything, and like that could have gone very bad if I didn't ask questions. And the person that I was with and the organization were very good. They explored what traits and what strengths I have. I came to them with, I think I'd be able to do this. Like I've got an idea, yes or no, what's right, what's wrong. They were very helpful. So it's very good to don't be afraid to ask the questions, and don't be afraid to put things forward. You're either going to get a yes or a no answer, and always get feedback and ask for feedback too, because feedback is the biggest thing.
That's wonderful, Curtis. Thank you. So you
You're
talked
welcome.
about a few things that the organisation and your supervisor did that were really helpful, being able to ask questions and things like that.
Yeah, definitely.
What about from TAFE? What sort of things or support did you get from TAFE that was really helpful while on placement?
So the most helpful thing I got from TAFE was I got to debrief with my teacher, through email, things like that. I would get correspondence like that. Also, just the knowledge that they gave me from the learning itself, like the amount of stuff you learn in TAFE, like I found was very helpful for when I was in work placement. I was like, oh, so this is where that goes, and that's how this works. It was really good. you know, and it's good to have good teachers as well as coordinators and all that kind of stuff. So the things you learn in the classroom, you can actually see get put into practice in work placement before you actually start utilizing it in the sector. So that was
Fantastic.
very helpful from TAFE, yeah. And the
Wonderful.
resources.
Thank you very much for sharing
Yeah.
your perspective there as a student
You're
and
more
now
than welcome.
working. It's great to
Yeah.
have you in the sector.
Yeah, it's lovely to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Curtis. Okay, I'm going to ask a few questions of Nathan now. Okay,
Oh, can you hear
Nathan.
me?
Yep, we can. So you were once a student completing training with TAFE and now you're a trainer. Can you tell us about that experience of how you went from student to eventually now becoming a trainer?
Yeah, I guess those that can't do teach. So no, it's been really good. Like I said before, Heather was my teacher at the time, and it was about maybe, I think I've been in the sector for about 15 years now. So did my Cert 4 AOD, and then went on to do a placement, and I got employment straight after placement. It was kind of at the time where there wasn't a lot of males in the role that I went into as well. So that was a bit of a plus. So at Southern Youth and Family Services, so it was a youth homeless service that dealt quite a lot in the AOD sector as well. And I was there for about maybe 7-8 years, and then went on to be a case manager in Nauru, working with refugees on the island, which was really good. From then left there and went into Triple Care Farm, which was a alcohol and other drugs rehab. And then from there, bits and bobs everywhere, then just done some teaching. And it was really good for me, I think, going through quite a lot of different sector industry experience, only to find myself teaching and still learning, even from the students that are coming in. So it's been good.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing your journey, Nathan.
No worries.
So why do you feel it's important for students to have that placement experience?
Yeah, I think just going off like the stuff that Curtis was saying, that it is good to see things go into practice, but also you don't know what you don't know. And as a facilitator, like we teach, I guess, best practice and stuff that's been used quite a lot. And the teachers have come from all different lots of training, and then going into the sector and seeing it firsthand. I think it was like the stats is 70-30. So in class learning, it's about 30%, and then actually putting into practice, you'll learn a lot more, obviously doing what you're doing, and that's actually being in the workforce. So meeting clients, actually communicating, putting strategies into place, and just being frontline is where you're going to learn all your stuff. And it's really hard in this industry to get employment if you don't have experience. And I think that being a student is where you can say that you at least got a bit of experience. And a lot of employment comes from being a student as well. So
Fantastic, absolutely. And in your experience as a trainer, what have you seen have been some of the benefits for the organisations that you've worked with that have taken students on?
Yeah. It's not, the students aren't always green going in, like complete learners. Like they might have come from other parts of the industry and they just might be upskilling, or they might be just choosing another part. And I think them going in is bringing like a breath of fresh air into an organization, and understanding legislations that have been taught in class or been taught by other organizations, and having up-to-date policies and procedures. And sometimes the students aren't burnt out already. So it's kind of good for them, for a service, to have, I guess, some new people in there. And sometimes it's also having diversity in an organization is amazing when it comes to different cultures and ages and genders and all that sort of stuff. It's really, really cool. So I think that that's, the organization gets just as much. I will say that it is a lot of work for an organization as well. Like you're getting a completely different personality coming into the organization, but the positives are that it is a new person, and change is good.
Thanks. Definitely having a fresh, enthusiastic, not necessarily young, but yeah, new person on the team to bring their various life experiences and other experiences. Yeah, really good point.
Yep.
Thank
Cool.
you.
No worries,
Okay, well,
thank you.
thanks for sharing, Nathan. And I'll now invite Heidi to come on. And there
Hello.
she is. Hello. So what I'd really love to know is a bit about your experience that you've had in supervising students.
Okay, well, I've had a fair amount of experience supervising students from all of the backgrounds that we've talked about today: community services, youth work, and the AOD sector, and also university student placement. So it's very interesting to be able to compare both, actually, very much in the AOD sector, and actually also when I used to work at NADA. I was just thinking there's actually been 2 community services students that have gone through NADA that ended up working at NADA actually as well. So there's all different sort of scopes that you can look at for your student placements too.
Fantastic. And yes, you wear quite a few little hats today in terms of the experience that you bring. Thank you.
Old.
No, not at all. So, as someone now working in an organisation, what would you say are some of the benefits that you've seen from that perspective, from having students?
Okay, could I just go back to the previous question? Sorry, because I did just have a few tips and tricks actually for people in the sector. And I think the really one great thing to do is, if you're wanting to take a placement, is talk to the teacher about your service. Be really clear about what your service is and what you need from your student. As mentioned before by Nathan, there's a lot of mature age students or people who are changing, and that's really, really useful. Do you need someone who's confident? Do you need someone who's had some previous experience? Or, you just want to say, I really need that person to be able to show initiative in the workplace. We're extremely busy. I need them to be able to do that. I also then interview the student. I'm very clear with the student about what the service is and what fit I'm looking for, and I give them the opportunity, very much so, to talk about what they're looking for to gain in their placement. I get them to bring their assessment with them, because there is absolutely no point, if you can't meet their assessment needs, to have that student on board, and we go through the assessment together. All of this prep will really help you once that person's on board. Then I also, sorry, just looking at my notes, really get them to check if the service is for them. For example, currently in the service that I manage now, it's very busy. We work with a very pointy end of young people. You don't necessarily need to know everything or be confident when you get here, but you need to be able to show initiative. You need to be able to be comfortable in a space with the young people who are coming in. And that'll also really give you some insight into whether you want that person in your space. You need to be really careful of your clients. And I'm, really clear about what the student will be able to do and what they won't be able to do when they're here, because sometimes a student might come in with some expectations that they're going to be doing counselling, or that they're going to be able to have one-on-one time with young people, for instance, where I am. So I'm very clear about what that is. Their placement time is crucial to them, and they need to be able to go into the right placement. And the time that you spend with having a student in your service is also crucial time. So you really can work on getting the right fit. And also then have a look at your staff component as well, because as the supervisor, you are responsible, of course, for the young person, for the work person, the work placement, but you might be able to then, get a little timetable together where they're spending some time with different staff as well. So the burden's not always not that it's a burden, but that the burden of that time is not always on yourself. So I just really, wanted to talk about those tips and tricks.
Don't apologise. They're fantastic top tips, and I imagine you would be a very sought after supervisor, being so thorough in your planning. They're fantastic tips. I've actually got a question from someone online who was curious to know, as a result of that pre-work that you do, the meeting up and discussing needs and expectations on both sides, how often that then translates into you taking that student on and then being suitable, or you being suitable for them?
Yeah, I would say in 90%.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
definitely.
Yeah. Well, that's really encouraging.
Yeah, it works really, really well for both parties.
Wonderful. Yeah. And what I also wanted to know from your point of view, from an organisation, what are some of the benefits that you've seen, either for yourself as a supervisor or for the broader organisation?
Sure. It does translate into employment for some people who come through, and it may not necessarily be employment at that particular time. For example, there was someone who had, when I was managing another part of the Ted Knopf's Foundation, the person who was managing here had a student who was brilliant, but not necessarily ready for the jobs that were in this service, but would be really great as an AOD worker. They let me know when I had my next vacancy come up. I got in touch with them to be able to put in an application, and that translated into them getting a job. So, thinking in the future as well as what you might also have available now. As an organisation, just like what Nathan was talking about, be open to learning from the student. It's been a while since I've been, in that sphere. And it's really great to get updated on what's happening in the sector as well. It's definitely can be a two-way street of learning. And just in general, I think when you're working with youth work or community services people, they may not have thought about the AOD sector. And then you've got some people looking at a sector that they weren't currently interested in looking at previously. So there's lots of positives to the organisation, plus the fact that we're all a bit understaffed. You've got someone else on the floor. It's fantastic. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing your insights and your tricks. I think they'll be really handy to people listening online. Thank you. Okay, I'll just invite all the panelists to turn their cameras on now. We've got time for some questions. I've noted a comment from a participant that says that there can be a preference for social worker placements in organisations. And what are all of our thoughts about why TAFE students could be preferable or a good investment? So I'm happy if there's any panellists who would like to jump on that first.
I think that's a really good question. I don't think it is a question of one or the other. I think social work students have it's a different experience doing a social work degree to a TAFE qualification, and they both have benefits. So it's not a them or us kind of thing. A lot of our students go on to study social work after they finish at TAFE, and we are really supportive of that and have really good arrangements with the universities. Our students who do a diploma generally get 1 year of credit into a social work degree. So the diploma of youth work or community services is really viewed as the first year of a social work degree. I guess one of the big things is, if you want staff, then having a TAFE student who walks out with a recognised qualification after 12 months at TAFE is a plus. So our students are doing a placement second half of their course, and a lot of our students get employment because they're work ready. So they've got their qualification after 12 months as opposed to 4 years. And that's, I guess, we gather a lot of early school leavers who come in and do our Certificate 3 course when they're 16 or 17. They go then to do a diploma when they're in their sort of Year 12 equivalent year. Their school peers who do their HSC go into first year uni. Our students go into second year at the same age. So they actually skip a year because they haven't completed Year 12 and gained an ATAR. And I'm not saying that students shouldn't stay at school and get an ATAR, but it's just about a different pathway. So yeah, lots of our students do get they're work ready. TAFE courses are skill-based courses. They're a different qualification to what someone does at university. There's some theoretical underpinnings in our course, but our students start there, to their horror, they start their skill practice almost like the third week of starting a course. And we're talking role plays and really, getting into the nitty gritty. Generally, that takes a little bit longer in a degree program. And it's about, working together and working out what your organisation needs. That might be in connection to skills, to your funding. So not one or the other, just a preference. And I guess if we're talking specifically about AOD, then that particular qualification does offer specific alcohol and other drug training as opposed to a broader qualification. Does that sort of answer the question for whoever had asked that one?
I mean, I believe, Heather, you've touched on some really important points there. And I was unaware of how the TAFE courses can provide credit into university level courses. So that's really good to know and to hear about the pathway that some students have. But yeah, as you say, it's not an either or, and it might depend on the experiences that a social work student or another sort of student is seeking from their placement experience. And having heard about Heidi's process of really meeting up and checking out, what are the assessment tasks that you're going to need to be able to have experience of here? What do they look like, and how well can this organisation cater for that, rather than it being about what the specific training is. But as you say, TAFE level courses are designed around the practical job role and designed to provide a student that is job ready after they complete, which is a great plus.
And it is vocational training, and it's interesting because one of the universities down in Victoria are running alongside their undergrad psych degree program a certificate in mental health work, because that vet qualification, and they're doing it in partnership with one of the RTOs, because the feedback from the students in psychology is they get a different degree to social work, where you don't really start any sort of more sort of hands-on work until getting to your postgrad stage. But the feedback from the students was we're not getting the hands-on skills that we need. And we do get a lot, not a lot, but we get quite a few students who have studied psychology who come to TAFE to do a Cert 4 or diploma to get that sort of practical experience. And likewise, we have students that go on and do psych and social work.
Yeah,
So
interesting. Thank you very much.
But just also add to that I'm currently completing Masters of Social Work and have completed also the Bachelor of Social Work. That it is really, I find it such a positive to go, like TAFE gives you the foundations, I think, like the really, I don't want to use the word basic, but the communication stuff and how to write a case note and the stuff that you guys would see in industry as like expectations. And I think that that's the stuff that is really good for students to come out with, even going in to be a social worker and knowing how to do those really basic foundational skills with like communication, writing case notes, and even case plans and stuff like that. I think that that is such a positive. Even to know the different types of drugs going into it within a year is such a plus. And it helps students. And then when they upskill and do want to develop and educate and go into a social work, psychology, whatever, they've already got that foundation, and it really, really helps. Well, I found it.
Wonderful. Thank you. And great to hear that you're continuing your education as well. That's fab. Did any other panelists have any comments about that question before we go on? Got a couple more.
I just wanted to also say there's 3 staff here. They've all started at TAFE. They've all gone on to university, and I'm one of those. So I'm a massive fan of TAFE because it does give you that real foundational, that real practical skill. I also supervise social work students and psychology students, and my TAFE students have got much more practical experience when it comes to things like case notes and all of that stuff. You're certainly not disadvantaged, and I think you're thought of very well in the industry as future employees.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got a question here, and it's probably for Heather and Nathan. If a supervisor, for whatever reason, is struggling to continue to support their student on placement, what can they do, and how can you support them and work with them so that that could continue?
Probably depends on what the issue is. I saw that question previously, and I was, sort of pondering about it and thinking, in some ways it's a specific question, but it's also got some broadness to it as well. So
maybe you can, Heather, think about some of the experiences you've come across and what those sort of reasons have been.
Yeah. So it can be perhaps that a student isn't doing what they're meant to be doing. That may be not demonstrating initiative, just sort of sitting around waiting for the supervisor to give them jobs to do, and that sometimes happens. And I guess in all the scenarios, what we would really encourage is that the supervisor has a conversation with the student if they are able to do that, if that's appropriate. If they believe they can't, or they've tried, etc., then the next step would be the TAFE teacher. So we set up within Region South. Now, TAFE Digital do it a little bit differently because they have such a large number of students across, the country. We set up the placements ourselves, so that the staff do that. We don't have students just go out and find a placement. We do that. So we set them up in a formal manner. So we would discuss at what we would call a pre-placement meeting the sorts of things that a student can do on placement, the things that the organisation can offer. That gets documented, any limitations that the student might have. It might be they don't drive, or they have a disability, whatever it may be, is discussed with permission from the student at that pre-placement meeting. So it's set up formally, and I think when that's done well, that can make a huge difference for a placement experience, because it creates a context and it outlines and tables what people's responsibilities are. Now, if a student comes to us, and it does happen, I'm on placement and it's not going too well, and we'll question them about that, well, what isn't going well? And have you talked to your supervisor about this? So we encourage that feedback and those conversations between the student and the supervisor. We know that always can't happen, but the TAFE teacher is there, or our education support officers who are getting really involved now with placements are there for I guess support for the student and for the organisational supervisor. Got anything to add, Nate?
Yeah, I think that just what Heather was saying, that you have a pre-placement interview, and it's not just for the organisation, it's also for the student to see if they like the service or meet the same values. And the key to it, as Heather was saying, is communication. If something's not going well, then communicating with TAFE or communicating with the TAFE supervisor and trying to come up with either a solution. And worst case scenario is there just might be another placement and they finish up there, and we could be only as flexible as the information that we've got, and it comes down to communication.
Great. Thank you guys for just outlining that. Similar to this is a question about, are there specific things that a student can and cannot do when on placement? Have you got any advice around that? Like, are there things that aren't appropriate for a student to do?
Go, Nath, you go.
There's the obvious ones, the stuff like we've got a code of conduct, and looking at the whole community services has a code of conduct and ethics that we've got to follow. So they're the ones that we don't need to really speak about, but also there's responsibilities got to fall on to the student a lot of the time. So turning up on time and being safe and all that, and having boundaries is the stuff that we really drill home with the students, and they're getting something out of it. It's not anyone else. So, and we're going to hear about it from you guys and the services. If things aren't going well, it's not something that's going to be swept under the rug. And again, it's that communication stuff. So I think that the main code of conduct, the ethical stuff, as well as their responsibilities. And with the assessments, I know that the supervisors are there to assist with assessments, but it comes down to the responsibility of the student as well. If they're not talking and trying to seek out the information for assessments, again, they're the ones that's going to miss out on it.
And in terms of, I guess, boundaries for student tasks, students aren't meant to be left on their own. They are students. They are covered by TAFE New South Wales insurance, so they're not under the organisational insurance policy, but not being left on their own. Not, going into a counselling interview with a client or an intake, that just wouldn't be appropriate. Certainly observing those is really fabulous, and working towards, say, doing those interviews with someone present to support them. We would really encourage that. Sometimes TAFE students, because they're not university students, sometimes aren't offered the same opportunities as psych or social work students. And I think that's a pity in some ways, because our students, for example, our Diploma of Community Services students, they do counselling units, they do case management units, they do mental health and AOD units. They're really skilled. They're in the fire very early on, as I mentioned before. So they carry, and I just assessed some of our counselling role plays a couple of weeks ago, as did Nathan, and the skill level is unbelievable for students that, this is their 1 year of study. They're walking out with this qualification. So highly skilled. In the pre-placement meeting, when the organisation, the supervisor talks about, well, look, these are some of the things we do here. How would you like to get involved is a really good question to ask a student. And then they can say, well, this is what I'm doing. This is what I feel comfortable with. I'd also really love to develop those skills and practice things that might be an intake with a client, for example. And they, in the AOD Cert 4, they are doing that. They are doing intakes in a simulated setting. Again, some of the units are quite clinical, so they're getting that experience. So again, it's a conversation with the student and the TAFE teacher, what a student can do. But the big no is, a student shouldn't be left on their own, and I wouldn't put them in with a client on their own. Yeah.
Thank you, Heather, for the specifics around that and the suggestion about that conversation up front. Yeah, wonderful. A question for Curtis. Someone online would like to know from you, Curtis, what messages would you have for organisations for them to know before taking on a student?
I guess my message to organisations would be make sure that you don't just leave the student to do paperwork or run errands, or be willing to engage with the student. And I think, like Nathan was saying, that pre-placement interview, I think that is very, very helpful. It's good for, like Nathan said, it's good for the student and it's good for the organisation as well. It definitely helped me. That interview, because I went through about 3 interviews, and I was very honest with myself as a student. I was like, that's not going to suit me. And I even had organisations go, look, this probably wouldn't be the best place for you, and I took that on the chin and I accepted that. And the best thing I would also say is make sure there are things to do that are in your scope. Don't give the student too much pressure all at once. Gauge how they're going. Make sure you're always debriefing with them after anything that you do with them. See where they're at all the time as well, and make sure that there is that boundary. If you are a student and you're trying to get away with, see how much you can get away with or anything like that, now you got to have them professional boundaries with the student and in the sector as well. Like, professional boundaries are very important, especially because that goes into your ethics and your morals and the legalities of everything as well. So it's always be very mindful of that. So yeah, that's my answer to that.
Thank you very much, Curtis, and I hope that answers things for those online. Heidi, curiosity from those online around your experience of working with TAFE and the support that they've provided to you.
Oh, I've always found that TAFE have been incredibly supportive. It's just, you can get in contact with the teacher that is running the particular placement course, no matter who that is. I've just, particularly, through COVID and after COVID, TAFE, so grateful for people to be able to be offered placements. Placements have been short and people haven't been able to complete their courses. But I've always found that that's been, really, really open and useful, and just set that communication up straight from the beginning as well. Does that answer the question?
I believe it does, but we'll see if we get anything further online. But somebody else wanted to know if you needed to do any specific training in order to be a supervisor.
That's a really good question. I haven't to supervise students. I supervise staff, and I supervise clinical staff. So personally, I feel qualified to do so, but not to my knowledge that TAFE expect people to have particular experience or, do something in particular to be able to supervise students.
Yeah, and I think I just saw Nathan shaking his head as though no.
I feel that if we have those interviews and we communicate with organisations, and if the community services is too small if something's going on, people will know about it. So if there's a good reputation in the service, and we expect the service to have good workers in there that are going to support and supervise students that are going in there.
Yeah, I think so too. Within an organisation where we would put students for placement, generally the staff would hold some qualifications, as certainly the supervisor. So that, I guess, that would be the one thing that we want someone to have some experience and qualifications in the sector. The only other little sticky point is for students that do want to go on to uni and do a social work degree, to get some credit for their placement hours that they do as part of their vet qual. They need to have those placement hours signed off by a social worker, and that's the AESW regulation. The universities won't give, as far as I know, unless it's changed in the last, more recent past, they won't give credit for those hours that a student does if it's not signed off by a qualified social worker. So
they'd need to know that they were going to need that sign off before they started and choose a setting where there was a social worker. Okay.
Yeah. And look, some students just go, look, whatever, I won't care. I don't care. I'll just redo a placement with uni, and, 200 hours doesn't make a huge difference for the large number of placement hours that a social work undergrad student needs to do anyway.
Okay, thanks. And there's one final question for Nathan and Heather, and that's someone asked about how you guys keep the resources for the course specific to AOD. How do you keep it up to date so that it's continuing to reflect practice in the sector?
You speak
Yeah,
to
no-
Nada.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Talk
Gold
to
star
them.
to you.
Send all their stuff to NADA, send all the teaching and learning material to NADA, which is what I have done. But look, because is this the question about is it updated and how is it created? Yeah. So we don't write the training packages. So just to make that really clear, they are written by industry. There is a new training pack. So training package is the overarching provider of what we teach. So we have to teach according to a national training package. We don't write those. They're developed by industry. We get a look at it and we can comment and provide feedback. It doesn't mean it's going to change. So we encourage our industry partners to get involved in this process, because there's things that we sometimes have to deliver within a training package that we don't necessarily want to deliver. We think it could be done quite differently, but we cannot dictate that. Once that training package comes out, and the community services training package is starting to drop now, the new training package, that's it. We have to deliver to that. Now, within that, we develop teaching and learning resources, but again, that needs to align with the training package. So we can't think, oh, look, we think this is really important to deliver to our students. If it's not in the training package, we can't teach and assess on it. Our staff are all current. So in order to teach a particular subject, so teach and assess on it, all teachers need to demonstrate their currency. So we go through quite an extensive mapping process, which is quite vigorous for staff. And that is where a teacher would demonstrate currency against a particular unit of competency. So that's a compliance requirement. So if we don't do that and we get audited, by ASQA, we're in a bit of strife. So ASQA is the peak body that looks after all the qualifications and makes sure that all the RTOs are doing the right thing and delivering what they should be doing. So hopefully that answers that question. I'll just quickly touch on, someone had asked around the diploma of alcohol and other drugs. I was halfway through typing a response to that, but just quickly, that qualification still exists. We don't run it in Region South. The only campus that delivers that across the state in terms of TAFE New South Wales as the RTO is Mount Druitt campus. I was looking at running it and sort of introducing that into our suite of courses, but because there's a new training package coming out, it wasn't worth putting the resources into developing that and until that new training package comes out. So yes, it's still there. It's course CHC 53215. Mount Druitt have got two offerings for that for next year. One is for students that have got no previous experience and haven't done the Cert 4 qual. The other one is a fast-tracked entry for students who have got the certificate for alcohol and other drugs. But yeah, we might look at in Region South putting that on once we see what it looks like in the new training package. It's pretty full-on qualification, a lot of clinical subjects attached to it. It's a good course. I like it. Yeah.
Thanks, Heather. I just want to thank all of our panel members today for their time and sharing all of their experience and their tips and tricks. It's really appreciated, and I hope that those online will go away having a better understanding about what's involved, and hopefully some willingness and excitement about taking on some students next year. So we will be providing some information out to all participants today with a bit more information about the TAFE courses across community services. And if you have any questions that you forgot to ask or want any more information, please reach out to us at NADA and we'll put you in touch with the right person. So have a great afternoon all, and thank you for your time, and I hope you found this beneficial.
Thanks, guys.
See you later.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
See you later.
Chris.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.